Okay, let's talk a little bit about what to do with the StrengthsFinder assessment that you took. So in the assessment, you answered a series of questions and you received a list of 5 words that were your top 5 strengths. So let's talk a little bit about what goes into creating the words that you received. So the reality is, in our society, we spend a lot of time thinking about weaknesses. A lot of times there's self-help books and there's programs designed to help people overcome weaknesses or deficiencies that they might have within their personality or at work. And one of the things that happens then is that we're often fighting against our true nature. If you think about something that you're really not good at or you really struggle at, but you're being asked to do it over and over, there's a lot of things that are going to go into that psychologically. You're going to struggle with it. You might not do work as well, those sorts of things. So we're not talking just about like math or English here. We are talking about sort of qualities or characteristics. So let me give you an example of what the text in the book that is the background for this says. So it talks about the fact that a lot of times in society, we're encouraged to work hard. And when we work hard, we can be anything we want to be. So there's stories of all sorts of movies and rags to riches type things that say, hey, if you come from nothing or you don't have something, you work really hard, you can gain that in the end. One example that they use in the book is the movie Rudy. So Rudy was a real life person, although I think the movie is fictionalized a little bit, about a young man who wants to play football at Notre Dame. The problem is he's not very good at football, and so he ends up being a walk-on. He practices year after year after year, puts in thousands of hours with the team. He never gets suited up. Finally, the last game of his senior year, they suit him up and they let him go into the field. Everybody's cheering him on, Rudy, Rudy, the whole crowd, the whole team. And according to the movie version, although I've heard this is not true to real life, according to the movie version, he gets 1 sack and they win the game. So after all of this time, he's working so hard, he finally overcomes and he has success. The book also tells a story, though, of a man who lives in Mexico and is a shoemaker. And what he's really good at is making shoes. The problem is what he's not really good at is collecting money and payment. And so his business is really struggling because while he can make the shoes, he's struggling to sell them or get payment for them. So along comes a friend of his who's really good at the marketing part and the collecting money. And so the two join together, and the one who's really good at making shoes keeps making shoes. And the one who's really good at the selling and the marketing and the collecting of money does that part, and they have this huge increase in their ability to sell shoes. So that's what the StrengthsFinder is saying. You cannot be anything you want to be, but you can be a lot more of who you already are if you're working in your strengths. So if we think about it this way, when we do not live into our strengths, we might dread going to work, we have more negative interactions than positive interactions, we might achieve less on a daily basis, and we have fewer positive and creative moments at work. So when we're working against our natural strengths, it's just not going to be as enjoyable, you're not going to feel as fulfilled. So even though life has struggle, we know that, the idea is how can we work to be better at our work, to be more influential perhaps, to be more creative, to be a better player on a team in an office by using our strengths. So here's the idea behind this, and I'll try to remove myself here. The idea behind this is that you have a natural talent, a natural way of thinking, feeling, or behaving that you were born with. This isn't necessarily a physical thing. These are mostly sort of emotional and psychological and those sorts of talents. But you tend to work in a certain way. Over time, you have invested into this talent, whether you know it or not. Some people have done it very intentionally because they knew they had this talent and wanted to keep working at it. Some of you, because you didn't know about this before, may have just discovered a proclivity or an interest in things over time. So you've invested time practicing, developing your skills, and building your knowledge base. And the result then, that time versus the talent talent times investment equals your strength. So your strength is an ability to consistently provide near perfect performance. The book goes on and says, compare someone like Joe Montana with Rudy. If you have the talent already, like someone like a professional football player, the physical skills, the natural way of behaving, the natural ability to throw a football, plus all the investment of time, you're going to get someone like Joe Montana or like an NFL football player who has the ability to be consistent and provide near perfect performance time after time because they've developed and nurtured that skill. So let's move on a second. I'll show you a little bit here, and then I'll take myself away again. But what we do is we divide all of these strengths into 4 different categories. And so we have relationship building, strategic thinking, executing, and influencing. Some of you are going to have strengths that spread over all 4 of these categories. You might be really balanced. Some of you may be pretty heavy in one category. So for instance, if I look at these 4 categories, my 4 of my 5 land in strategic thinking. So I have context, input, intellection, and learner all in strategic thinking. I have 1 in relationship building, relator. So if you look over this list, you can kind of get a sense of where you fall. And what happens is, depending on what your other strengths are, one strength may manifest a little bit differently than in other people. So because I'm so heavy in strategic thinking, my 4 there tend to really build on each other and create this pretty in my head sort of world that I live in. But some people who might have a few strategic thinking but have more relationship building or more executing may see that the way that they use that strength is embodied differently than the way I would use mine. So one of the things I would ask you to do is to take a minute and look at these 4 categories before you go on to do your activity. And I have the 4 categories posted for you on Moodle so that you can see them. And so look them over, figure out sort of where you fall, and then move on to the activity for the day.